there was a question that just popped up, and that was saying that this kind of activity of taking over temples is normalized in the name of saying that, okay, there is a lot of corruption. Well, my standard counter has always been that you do not cut off the head to cure the headache. If you have a headache, then you administer medicine. You don't simply cut off the head. So if there is a corruption, there is corruption in Christian missions also. In fact, there is more corruption in Christian missions and the madrasas and such things than you can ever imagine in the temples. Yet, this kind of standard argument is taken up. And in my opinion, the political class, the entire political class, it doesn't matter whether it is this color or that color, it is mainly interested in taking over temples for the influence that it commands. And they think that their political ambitions can be fulfilled through the temples. Sir, I want you to please give us an overview. I'm not yet talking of the constitutionality, Article 26, but the basic principles that are involved in consecrating a temple and why it is important that the sampradaya that actually consecrates the temple must remain in possession of that. After that, I will come to the Article 26 that actually recognizes that right, and then we will go to Sri Ramesh.
You see, my view is that this is a very complicated problem and it has to be taken care of at 3 or 4 levels. First of all, it has to be taken care of in terms of history. And we have to make it clear that so far, starting with the British, because during the Islamic period, the temples were either destroyed or they were left alone. So there was no such state that the government or the king or the Shah would take over. There was nothing of that sort. But this starts with the British. This starts with the British with the whole intention that the money is taken in and that there is a reform in the temple. You see, this whole idea which has been built up is that Hindus are mismanaging their whole thing. Hindus have to be taught by the white man as part of the white man's burden as to how to manage things. And therefore, their temples also, their spirituality, etc. Now, under the garb of that, the Congress government did this, and now the BJP government has also done it. So we have to first of all counter at that level, and we have to tell any political party, whether BJP, Congress, or whatsoever, that Hindus, the majorities, the 80% people of this land, will manage their temple not only because it is their constitutional right under Article 26, that's a minor matter, but because this has been the tradition of 5,000 years. You see, there were all kinds of temples in our history. Now, there were some which may be called royal temples. But they were royal temples because the king started that temple right from the scratch. And then in the ancient system, even if the king started it from scratch, if he gave all the money and he maintained it, still he was not running the temple. The running of the temple had to be done by a certain class of people who belong to that particular deity sampradaya. If this temple was a Shaiv temple, then it would be done according to the Shaiv tradition, Shaiv agamas, by the people who were practicing and doing the sadhana for that deity. So this is the fundamental Hindu principle, and this needs to be argued in all courts of law at all levels, whether district court, high court, or the Honorable Supreme Court, that Hindu alone can do it. No reform business, because if reform business comes in, then we'll have a stalemate like we had a stalemate in Sabrimala. because the modern state, the enlightened state, does not know how to conduct the rituals. Therefore, it is a primary right of the Hindu to do his puja, to do his worship. This has to be now taken and undertaken at a very wide scale. Therefore, the taking over of the temple is illegal, unconstitutional, non spiritual, and anti Hindu per se. So we have to mount a very big nationwide program in order to let the Hindus be aware of it in terms of politics and in terms of voting, in terms of relationship with BJP as well. This is one thing. The other thing is that we must start thinking in very seriously in constitution in making those bodies which can take over the temples once the Honorable Supreme Court or the local court says, okay, we give the temple back to you, but who shall take it over? You see, this is also a problem. It's a big problem, and I know Mr. Ramesh would be able to enlighten us a lot about how this has happened and where Hindus have failed. So, this is the second thing that we should nationally say that, okay, there was a time when kings could take over, there was a time when there were Agam Shastris, there was a time when there were practitioners of the old kind, and there were dharmakartas and dankartas. But now we have a new class which can do it. We can have committees which correspond with all those purposes, all those aims and objectives of a temple, which can consist of the architects, the people who know the Agam Shas, the scholars of Sanskrit, the scholars of Prakrit and other languages, dancers, performers, all those people who can make life of a temple which is helpful and which makes Hinduism flourish in that region according to the practices of that region. So, this is the second challenge. And we have to start making those committees. We have to, I would go to the extent of saying that we can hypothetically say that we will get this temple back and such date, and this committee will take over. We should start proposing, we should make it clear so that nobody can say that, what if we give it back to you? It will fall into a den of corruption again. And then the third step is to expose and write as to how temple wealth is being misappropriated by the secular state. How the secular state, how the administrators appointed by the secular state, including very highly trained officials of the Indian administrative services, have resulted in endemic corruption, and how these people are unqualified. We have to start writing about it. That how is it possible that somebody whom the government appoints because he is a good officer or somebody in the good books of the government, he shall be able to handle the temple affairs? This is impossible. Nobody does it in Europe. Nobody appoints a bishop because he is in the good books of the government. How can this happen with the secular state? So these are the 3 points. We have to extensively talk about it and mount an intellectual offensive. This is my submission.